And this might be a surprise for many people, but if you have been following the channel, you know it was bound to happen. Harris' campaign has been downright horrible, and Donald Trump, he played a PR game to perfection. And if you add in all the immigration issues, it was essentially a wrap. Trump has gained enough seats, 270, to become president, so he is coming back in 2025. He's the president-elect, which means next year the US will be a whole different beast. We have to talk about Trump's policies because the threat of America going full protectionist is really there. It's not only the presidency that needs to be considered, the entire US government is turning red. The Senate is now majority Republican, the House is also on its way there as well. Whatever policy Trump puts out there will likely be passed. There are no more roadblocks, so if he wishes to start a global trade war, there's very little to stop him. Trump has made many radical promises. The first, of course, is his promise of reciprocal tariffs. And that's probably the first shoe to drop. Trump's going to clobber countries that dare to tariff US goods.
And we will pass the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act if China or any other country, it's not just China, charges us a 100 or 200% tax or tariff, then we will charge them an identical 100 or 200% tax or tariff. Here's the story. They charge us, we charge them. You know what's going to happen? They're not going to charge us. Very simple. It's called an eye for an eye. I will never apologize for defending America.
It's really interesting to see the reactions of NATO and the EU. Europe is in panic mode. We'll have to talk about those. We have leaders like Macron scrambling to congratulate Trump. And let's not forget France's big tax on US tech companies. Digital companies doing business in France that pass a certain threshold will have to pay a 3% tax on revenues. And that's going to bring in at least 670 million euros to France in 2023. So tech giants like Google and Facebook, they are affected. Biden might have allowed that, but everything is going to change quite soon. We can be sure that Trump is going to slap back on that tax, and his 10% global tariff will be used as a stick to start negotiations.
Emmanuel, you're putting a big tax on American companies doing business in France. You can't do it. Oh, it's too late. Oh, I wish you would have called me early. It's too late, Donald. I cannot do it. I said, yeah, you're going to do something about it. You got to do it. Are you going to do it? I won't be able to. I said, let me just tell you something, Emmanuel. Are you ready? Every bottle of wine and champagne that comes into the United States, this was a Friday evening, starting on Monday morning, is going to be taxed and tariffed at 100%. Every single bottle of wine and champagne from France will be taxed at 100%. No, you cannot do that. I said, I can do it. It's done. I have an order right in front of me. I'm signing it. You have 10 minutes. Call me back. He calls me back in about 3 minutes.
But let's talk about China and Donald Trump, because what happened is going to change the calculus for Beijing. If Kamala won, then things would be rather easy. We'll see a controlled escalation in the economic war. Restrictions in semiconductors will get tighter, but more or less very manageable for the Chinese. But the second coming of Trump just flipped the equation. China can't afford to stand idle and allow Trump to start his opening salvo. They have to act now and they have to act hard. If the 60% tariff comes, Beijing has the tools and the will to fight back. The government is preparing a $1.4 trillion stimulus package and they are on the brink of releasing it. A 60% tariff will destroy what's left of US-China trade, and Chinese exporters still rely quite a bit on trade with the US. In 2017, China exported 18% of their trade to the US, and that's the single biggest country ahead of the EU and Hong Kong. Exports have fallen below 15% today, but still a sizable chunk. Countries in the BRICS and Southeast Asia, they are picking up the slack. Exports to Mexico are also rising, but it's not fast enough. The only route left is to ramp up domestic spending, so we can expect a big bazooka stimulus coming in the days and the weeks ahead. China's finance ministry is meeting in a matter of days and it's not a coincidence. The PBOC has confirmed that the stimulus is going to come and the intensity of it is going to increase, that the Chinese government is ready to counter the tariff war with Trump. We cannot overstate how important this stimulus is. The risk of US trade collapsing to zero is quite real, and that will affect jobs and incomes for tens of millions at the very least. Sentiment in the Chinese property will get worse as well. so the stimulus will help to reverse that. During Biden's term, we heard the rhetoric that China's uninvestable and that hammered foreign money flowing into Chinese assets. Beijing needs to reverse this as well. Foreign holdings of Chinese assets fell by 15% from 2022 and only recently rebounded in 2024. When Trump won, we saw US stocks rally and almost everything else sell down. They want to put a floor on real estate, boost domestic consumption, and restore confidence in Chinese stocks, which means unleashing the stimulus tsunami as well. This isn't all great news for the US, let's remember this. If Trump slams China with a trade war, we can expect them to retaliate. 6 to 7% of total US exports still ends up in the Chinese market. A big loser will be US farmers. Since 2017, China has been reducing their reliance on US food imports. Take soybeans for example. China imports around 7 million tons a month. Total consumption is rising, but the majority is coming from Brazil. The US used to supply more than 40% of China's supply at a peak, and this has dropped down to 20%. During the campaign trail, Trump threatened John Deere with tariffs if they ship production to Mexico. So if the tractors are forced to be made in the US, this will jack up the cost of food production. And this means China now has two big incentives to decouple completely from US food imports, to retaliate against the tariffs, and because prices are just too high versus other producers. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Moomoo. I've been buying US stocks and ETFs for the longest time, and Moomoo is a fantastic commission-free platform I use daily. 2025 is going to be wild, and no matter who wins the elections, there will be chaos. But this also means a world of opportunity to invest in great stocks to grow your wealth. And that's why I want to talk about Moomoo. It's an investing app that I use to buy and sell stocks from the US all the way to Hong Kong. And there's going to be lots of action this election season, and after that, you don't want to miss. Moomoo is a Nasdaq listed brokerage that's partnered with Nasdaq. You can search keywords and find concept stocks with just one click. For example, you can find stocks associated with Trump, especially after his win. You can identify stocks linked to his economic policies that could really benefit. And once you have your stock picks, Moomoo also supports pre-market and post-market trading. And that's my favorite feature, especially with my busy schedule. In addition, Moomoo offers 6 types of conditional orders, including stop limit orders. And this helps you invest better without the need to constantly monitor the market closely. Best of all, if you sign up today, there are welcome rewards, including a stock bundle worth up to $1,034 waiting for you. Get an additional $20 when you sign up using my link. But that's not all, you also get lifetime commission free in the US stock market. So give Moomoo a try and start investing today. Now while China's preparing, we have to talk about the EU. The Europeans, they are panicking. No one in Brussels believed that Trump was going to win. NATO also didn't factor in a Trump win. But the calculations have collapsed. Trump's second coming is setting Europe into a tailspin. Von der Leyen, she's scrambling with her response. She's telling Trump to work closely with the EU to build a strong transatlantic agenda. And it's really obvious that Europe needs the US more than ever. EU industries are collapsing, so US demand is necessary. They have also damaged relations with the Russians and the Chinese, and because of that, the EU has very little bargaining power left. Firstly, the US dollar has strengthened. Since Trump won, the dollar has gained at least 1.2% against global currencies. And this is especially bad for Europe. EU exports are dropping while their imports are now much more expensive. So industries are about to get squeezed even further. Trump wants Europe to buy more stuff made in America. But can Europe even afford to? Buying stuff made in the US, especially with a strong dollar, is highly inflationary. China exports deflation while the US exports inflation, and this is extremely evident now. But the bigger problem facing the EU is their defense budgets. Trump wants NATO to pay up, and he has hinted on this many times before.
In saying that NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense. This is not fair to the people and taxpayers of the United States. And many of these nations owe massive amounts of money from past years. We have to make up for the many years lost.
So, in no uncertain terms, Europe has to pay up. It's time to cough up their protection money. Trump, he's going to collect on their insurance premiums. But realistically, can the Europeans pay? Since the 1990s, the EU has consistently cut their defense budget. Even today, defense spending is near record lows. Germany is down by 28%, France at minus 35%, and the UK is the worst. Britain has slashed their budget by over 50%. So if Trump comes collecting, can the EU economies afford the extra expense? What will happen to their industries? The EU definitely doesn't have a trade surplus, so the money has to come from deficit spending, which means a greater debt burden. But let's talk about Russia for a bit as well. Throughout the campaign trail, Trump has boasted that he would resolve the war, that he'll bring Putin and Ukraine to the negotiating table, that he'll conclude the conflict in 24 hours. Russia, of course, is very hesitant to conclude this as a victory. The Kremlin is very skeptical and they are adopting a wait and see approach. They still consider the US as a hostile state. Over the last year, Trump has made very bold promises and he has to deliver now. A big part of his campaign is to restore peace to Europe, to get the war to end.
I would fix that within 24 hours. And if I win, before I get into the office, I will have that war settled. 100% sure. If I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, you gotta make a deal. This is crazy.
And if we look at the Russian statements, they want something really tangible from Trump. The promise of ending the war by December sounds grand, it sounds great, but realistically, it's not going to happen. It's going to be a slow burn, and from the Russian readout, Putin wants to see concrete steps being taken. Peskov has said the US is both directly and indirectly involved. Change can't be done overnight, but the US has the power to change the trajectory of their foreign policy. A big point of contention would be, of course, the frozen Russian assets. Will Trump continue confiscating the money, or will he do a U-turn? He'll U-turn the sanctions and give the money back. And all these are very big questions that need answers. During Biden's term, the G7 has confirmed a $50 billion loan to Ukraine backed by the assets. And is Trump going to go ahead with the plan? Because if it does, Russia won't see this as a sign of good faith. So Trump's victory has to be met with concrete action. And to be honest, it's more like a coin flip at this point. Trump's motto, as we all know, is peace through strength. However, this strength, especially his tariff war, can backfire quite badly. He's a strong man who won't back down from a fight. And if he goes through with his campaign promises, the US economy will also feel the heat. A trade war with the world could crash US GDP and increase inflation. And the effects aren't small depending on the scenarios. If the world retaliates, US GDP will fall by 1.3%, while CPI will increase by 50 basis points. That of course will mean higher unemployment going forward. But if China alone retaliates, it would mean an inflation nightmare for the US. GDP might drop by 0.8%, but just look at CPI. It would raise inflation by 4.3% by 2028. The cost of living crisis is going to escalate, the middle class will get squeezed even further. So no matter how you chop it up, tariffs are very bad news for the US economy. So we gotta hang tight guys, a Trump win is earth-shattering. Every single equation in the world is being flipped. But let me know what you think. Will Trump really make a difference in Washington? And will he begin his global trade war? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.